Hey guys, this is John Johnson, and I decided I was going to screencast this video. That way you guys could see the article that I pulled up. Just so you can have a brief, um, if you're not familiar with the situation, you have a brief idea of where I'm going here. But the case I decided to pick was the Jonathan Martin, Richie Incognito situation with the Miami Dolphins. Both players were offensive linemen. They were teammates. Um, Recently, Jonathan Martin, number 71, right here, he decided that he was going to quit the football team. And for a while, we didn't know what the situation was, but finally, he decided to come out and make claims, and he lawyered up that his teammate, Richie Incognito, number 68, was verbally and physically abusing him while he was a player for the Miami Dolphins. It's a tough situation um, for anybody to be hazed, but Jonathan Martin decided to come out and state that not only was he being abused, but he was going past the limit of hazing. Um, in the NFL and in football in particular, I know when I was a college player, we had certain things we did to incoming freshmen or younger players. Whether it was making them get in the ice bath, or carrying somebody's pads, or they had to do something funny. They had to sing a song in opening meetings, or whatever it may have been. There was some sort of rite of passage, and the same thing happens in the NFL, and they do go a little bit further than that, but most of the time it's good, wholesome team bonding fun. But Martin's situation got a little bit crazy, a little out of, well, more than a little bit, but got way out of hand, to the point where he felt like his life may have been threatened. There were threatening phone calls um, being made from Incognito to Martin, and it got to the point where he was so emotionally distraught that he eventually had to leave the team and seek psychiatric help. Now, by Martin making these claims and lawyering up, he did something that broke a lot of NFL protocols, and that's taking the sanctity of what happens in the locker room out and putting it into the public light. That's something that you don't do. And by him doing that, he ended up feeling or being ostracized by a lot of his teammates. A lot of his teammates recently have come to the defense of Richie Incognito, which I find a little despicable, considering some of the things that were being said, some of the racial slurs that Incognito was saying to Martin. And it's not like Incognito had a clean past before. Um, Incognito was a former O-lineman at the University of Nebraska. He was suspended 1 year, and then he was eventually kicked off the team. And then the following year, he went to the University of Oregon and never played a game before he was kicked out. These transgressions followed him into the NFL. In 2011, I believe it was, he was also rated as the dirtiest player in the league. But by Martin taking a stand, and by Martin, issuing a public statement, and lawyering up and taking the things that happened within the clubhouse outside and putting in the public light of what was going on to him, and some of the injustices that he felt were happening, the teammates of his ended up turning their backs on him as of late. So that's some of the ramifications that he's feeling from being a whistleblower. Martin is also not returned to the team. He doesn't feel comfortable. Yet Incognito, even though he's suspended, he's still allowed to be somewhat around the team. He's still technically employed by the team, though he hasn't received any checks yet. But in many ways, by Jonathan Martin standing up for what he believed was, a wrongdoing, an injustice, he's actually felt a lot of the brunt of taking a stand. Martin also took a stand for many other players that have not spoken up. There's a story that was coming out that hasn't been really publicized yet, but a player in the NFL who was, being hazed or being bullied was actually getting slapped in the face every day by different teammates, just getting walked up and slapped, and to the point where it was not a game anymore, but it was totally demeaning to him. he never had the courage to stand up and say anything. He decided he was just going to take it because he thought it was the rite of passage, and it was the right thing to do and to keep things in-house. Martin, however, thought and realized that sometimes it goes too far. And by him speaking out, he's looking for change, not only for himself, but an opportunity to change how things may be done within the NFL, so someone else doesn't have to feel the same things that he went through, or that he's going through. So it's an interesting case. On one hand, had Martin not stood up and said anything, it could have gone. The situation could have just gone away. Not in the sense gone away where he would not have been physically and verbally abused, but when he left the team, he possibly could have been welcomed back after seeking some help that he didn't end up seeking. He could have been welcomed back, or he could have been, possibly traded to another team. That doesn't seem very likely now because a lot of players, not only on his team but across the league, kind of get this feeling that Martin, by making the statement about incognito, by going out of his way to blow the whistle on some of the injustices that are happening to him, publicly and lawyering up. A lot of players throughout the league feel like Martin is a guy who can't be trusted, a guy who you can't have on your team because he's not a team player, and he's a little soft, and he didn't want to do the same things that everybody else in the league, has done for years and years and years. So by him speaking up, he doesn't have a job now, and he may not have a job in the future, but he could invoke some kind of change throughout the league because now league officials are looking into this case and they're looking for ways to prevent situations like this from happening. Martin's a former second-round pick. He went to Stanford, so he had a lot of potential. So the NFL doesn't want to see some of its potential stars, feeling so overwhelmed from an incident that's, not only wrong but criminal. The fact that Incognito was threatening him, his mother, and then eventually calling him racial names. The league doesn't want to see that happening to any of its players, to the point where, especially its stars or up-and-coming stars, feel like their only way of avoiding the situation is to either quit or walk away and retire from the league. So the Martin case is still developing. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with Incognito, whether he's going to be kicked out of the league, or if he'll get a job next year, because it's all likely that he will not return to the Dolphins, even though he's suspended. But he's a talented guy. There's a chance another team will pick him up because he was trying to toughen up Martin, or whatever it may be. It's going to be interesting to see what happens to Martin. He's a guy that, like I said before, doesn't have a job, doesn't have a team, and now has this target on his back as a guy who was blowing the whistle. And he now has a target on himself, yet all he was trying to do was correct an injustice. So whistleblowing, it could end up turning to backfire on Jonathan Martin, but it was the right thing to do. He was protecting himself, standing up for his rights, standing up for what he believed in, and standing up for himself against somebody bullying him and treating him very, very wrong. So it'll be interesting to see how this case develops over the next couple months and what happens to these two young men.